Now that we've heard from both the optimism and pessimism sides of the spectrum, our next panel will be the highly anticipated debate, Resolved, Technology is Destroying Democracy. Undermining Democracy. Undermining Democracy. And I will turn it over to our moderator, Silicon Flatiron's Coordinator of Spectrum, Policy Initiative Coordinator, and Executive Fellow, Pierre de Vries.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. We'll see if there's audio, and there is. There's audio and there's attention and there's a full house. Thank you everybody for coming back from the break. So yes, much anticipated because of the people we have. Every panel is much anticipated because of the wonderful people that we have here today. So this is our debate. And the topic of the debate today is Technology is Undermining Democracy. We're going to do this as a slightly bastardized Oxford debate version. So we're going to have a poll beforehand. You're going to get to vote on the proposal. So if you go to that URL, you'll get a SurveyMonkey page. And please vote yes or no on that. Just bear in mind that you're going to hear some very powerful advocacy in the next hour. So whatever the first thing you thought of, think twice before you vote. And I'm sure there are people in the room who've already figured out how to hack this and vote twice. Please don't do that. We know you can. At the end of the debate, we will have another poll. And so there are two things that are going to be interesting apart from the debate that you'll hear. One is, what's the sense of the people in the room? But really what we want to see is how your opinions change over the next hour. So that's why we're going to have a debate at the beginning and a debate at the end. So while you go to that URL and vote, we'll keep that up for a few moments while I just yatter on. The speakers are taking on a challenge of debating for you. So one of the things that you should bear in mind, Amy called this the legal panel. I'm the designated non-lawyer. Everybody else is a lawyer on this panel. But they're all advocates. And so you should not assume that the positions that they're taking are the positions that they actually personally hold. They're trying to persuade you of something. So just bear that in mind. The other thing is, I haven't actually done the research, but whoever came up with this wonderful logo for this conference, the Ian Young symbol, I want you to bear that in mind too. One of the caveats about a poll like this, where you're being asked to vote yes or no on something, is that nothing is a yes-no question. We know that. We all know that. Every yin has a bit of yang in it, which is why, in the white circle there's a black dot, and in the black part there's a white dot. But just bear that in mind. So let me briefly introduce the panelists. If you want to know more about them, go to the website. We have from your left to my right, Professor Paul Ohm, Professor of Law at Georgetown, and also Associate Dean for Academic Affairs. That's why he doesn't look like he's getting enough sleep.
Yes. That's one reason, yeah.
That's one reason. Actually, he also came in this morning. Somebody else who came in this morning is Ahmed Ghapour from Boston University School of Law, Associate Professor there. One of the reasons why he's not getting enough sleep is that his kids are not well right now,
That's right.
but getting better. But I just learned breaking news that was it the 4-year-old?
The 4-year-old.
The 4-year-old has eaten kale for the first time. So there is always reason to be optimistic. Then we have Andrew Bridges, a partner at Fenwick & West. He's a litigator. He's a very active practitioner. I'm sure he has lots of reasons for not getting enough sleep. As does Cindy Cohn, who's executive director of EFF. Please give us a warm welcome to all four your debaters. So I'm hoping that most of you who have had a chance to vote, we'll keep this open for a little bit, and I will refresh this.
Yeah,
so let's just get a snapshot. No, this is real time, and this app actually works, unlike some apps that we've heard about recently.
Wow.
So here we have technology is undermining democracy. Essentially, 55% yes, 45% no, and from here we'll have our debate. The format is going to be: we'll start with the proposer, Paul. We'll go to Cindy, who will oppose. Then Ahmed will speak, and then Andrew. Each of them get 6 minutes to speak. Then we will have a Q&A, and then we'll have, amongst the panelists will grill each other, and then we'll have closing arguments. So, Paul, take it away.
Thank you once again for having me. For those who are repeat offenders here at the conference, you know this is my third consecutive debate. I think I won the first year and lost the second. So a split decision in the best of three is decided today. I do note the irony of putting a lot of stock into electronic voting when I'm about to tell you why we should not put a lot of stock into electronic voting. But it did surprise me, given the tenor of this morning's conversation, to see what seems like a glimmer of optimism from those of you who are sitting in the audience, perhaps optimism that hasn't been mirrored from up here on the panels. Let me tell you why those optimists in the audience are dead wrong. Technology is undermining democracy. There are technological forces that are quarreling with and defeating the rule of law, our democratic institutions, and the way we select and vote on matters as in a democracy. And so before I launch into that litany, and there really is a litany, although a lot of the litany has been played out this morning, let me focus like a good law professor on the call of the question that you're asked to vote on once again at the end. Okay, number one, we are asking you about technology. But I at least would contend, and maybe my opponents disagree, that by technology, we're not talking about all technology. We're not talking about some inexorable force of technological progress that tends to undermine democracy. We're talking about the specific set of technologies that are bestowed upon us right now by our technological overlords. We're talking about social medias as they're currently constructed, and search engines, and smartphones. And it's our contention, Ahmed and I, that this witch's cauldron of technology is seriously and significantly undermining democracy. Number two, pay attention to the fact that the verb tense is undermining. I actually, on our prep call, said that we should have to argue that it has undermined democracy. It would have been a heavier lift, but one that I would have felt the burden to bear. But they agreed to let me have the easier argument, is undermining. And again, it may be 20 years from now we figure this out and we have not undermined democracy, but I think at today's moment, technology is undermining democracy. Rather than go through an extraordinarily long litany, let me just give you a framework, a topology, a taxonomy to think about different categories of ways in which technology is undermining democracy. I think I can think of three broad buckets. Technology is interfering with the way we vote, with how we inform ourselves and others, and with how we are governed. And let me just say, because I'm probably already close to my time, 30 seconds about each one of those. How we vote is a pretty easy conversation after last Tuesday's events in Iowa. We are voting online and we shouldn't be. We are registering people to vote using technological systems that are connected to the internet, and we shouldn't be. We are using get out the vote or don't get out the vote technologies on the internet, and they are dampening turnout. These are all ways that there is a direct attack of technology on our democratic systems. The second is probably the longest and most multivarious, but it's also been discussed the most today, so I'm just barely going to touch on it. Technologies are used to undermine an informed and engaged electorate. Technologies, to put it plainly, are making it hard to know what is true. So in an age of disinformation, in an age of fake news, and as we heard, in a specter of deep fakes, and it's not just visual deep fakes, there will be artificial intelligent bot deep fakes, so you're not even sure that the person you're quarreling with on Twitter is actually a human being. In the wake of all of that, I think we're in for a pretty profound epistemological crisis where it won't even be possible to know what is true or what is false. Like I said, we have touched on this a lot today, but I hope, especially the middle part where we get to interrogate one another, we can really drill into things like echo chambers and filter bubbles and the research around how all of those have unspooled. Number three, and this is in some ways taking perhaps a little bit of liberty with democracy, but I would contend that part of being part of a functioning democracy is having democratic institutions and this funny thing we used to call the rule of law. And technology has undermined all of the above. Look no further than what's happened to privacy and surveillance. It is now the case that every one of us is being tracked in a kind of intimate, minute-by-minute way by companies you've never heard of, governments you have heard of, your own and foreign. And so what will that do as the kind of realization of the surveillance state that we've created to your individual choices, the things that help you develop into an informed democratic participant? Are you going to not go somewhere where you would go, or say something that you would say, or be with someone that you would be with?
1 minute.
Okay, and let me tell you two other ways then that technology is flouting this thing we call the rule of law. We basically now have large corporations, platforms are perhaps the biggest sinners, but they're not alone, who act like nation states. They hide behind legal immunities, they have a lack of transparency, they have figured out how never to pay taxes when they have misdeeds that are brought to light. They've learned that all they have to do in a very Trumpian way is put your head down, apologize a few times, and the storm will pass. And last but not least, we've given disproportionate power to individuals, to harassers, to trolls, to hackers, to botnet farmers, individuals who have the capability and capacity to quarrel and tinker with the lives of millions, if not billions, of people around the world. There are forces that are defeating the rule of law at every turn. And frankly, given the theme of this conference, I'm pessimistic there's much we can do about it.
Time's up. 6 minutes and 4 seconds. That
Hey,
would be hard to beat.
You can have 4 more seconds.
Thank you, Paul. He yields his time. Good afternoon, everybody. I have to give a big thank you to Amy Stepanovich, and I welcome the Stepanovich era here at Silicon Flatirons. Especially because of the seamless way that she created just an amazing range of diversity on these panels. That is not easy, and she really double, triple axle landed it with this conference. And I also want to hand it to her because I told her the last time we talked that as one of the people who spent the last 20 years telling everybody it could go terribly, terribly wrong with technology, I felt like my project for the next few years was to try to actually point the way out and to be optimistic, because I don't think we can build a better world unless we can envision it. And so she took me up on it and made me defend this position right now. So, the posit here is technology is destroying democracy, and the central word in there is technology, right? I have a news for you, my friends. We have met the enemy, and he is us. Don't blame the poor ones and zeros. They didn't do this, we did. And we have to take the responsibility to fixing it. And by blaming technology, I think we're engaging in a gigantic process of having lifted up a rock and found a bunch of maggots underneath, blaming the hand that lifted the rock, as opposed to trying to figure out why we have so many maggots in our homes. So I want to talk a little bit about misinformation, a little bit about algorithmic targeting, and a little side note of election security. And all of these are situations in which I think we are blaming the technology when we should be blaming the humans and asking the much harder questions about how we fix some problems in our society. I only have 6 minutes to start here, so let me start with misinformation. And let's, one of my favorite actors is Matt Damon, and so let's science the shit out of this for a second, shall we? Because there is a big story going on, right? That Russia interfered with our election, and that, Macedonian teenagers were able to convince Americans to vote for somebody who they never would have voted for had it not been for the misinformation. But luckily, my friend Yochai Benkler at Harvard's Berkman Center has come to the rescue with some actual science looking at what the impact was. I think there is no doubt that there are concerted efforts to try to affect our elections. I think nobody I think that's true. But the research demonstrates that, and this is a quote from Professor Benkler, it seems to have played a relatively small role in the overall scheme of things. The idea that the Russian attempts to impact our election had a meaningful difference in the outcome of the 2016 presidential elections are, and I can't do his accent, but thin and speculative. Why? Because nobody bought it. It did not work in the way that they thought it would work. It definitely convinced people who already were going to vote for one candidate that they should vote for that candidate. But the point of if the point of this disinformation campaign is to elect somebody other than the person who was already going to be elected, it failed. It failed. Now, that doesn't mean we don't pay attention, but I think it does mean that we have to think about where we go for solutions. The greater impact was seen by things that I think, and I agree with Paul, I think the focus today isn't on all technology. We're not talking about, how do you start fire. We're talking about today's current technology, but a greater impact in people's positioning was seen by this horrible, horrible technology that I think we must do away with right away, and that's radio and television. So Fox News, Breitbart, InfoWars, Drudge, right-wing radio have had a tremendous impact on polarization in our society. Not, I think far, far outweighing any role that social media might have played. Now, I'm not going to let them all the way off the hook, but I do think that we need significantly more transparency. But there's 2 papers in 2019 that were published in the fake news journal called Science. I'm kidding. One looked at Twitter and the other looked at Facebook. And they looked at the sharing of fake news. And they found that the sharing of fake news was concentrated among conservative and very conservative users and was strongly associated with age. In particular, people older than 65 shared fake news at a level far, far outweighing the youths. One paper is called Fake News on Twitter During the 26 U.S. Presidential Election. Professors at Harvard, Northwestern, and SUNY Buffalo. I can give links if you want. And the other one was by Guess, Nagler, and Tuckler, which is Princeton and NYU. And
1 minute.
On Facebook.
1 minute.
1 minute. All right. So let me just quickly talk about algorithmic targeting. It's another one that has a lot of attention, whether we're talking about Cambridge Analytica or another. There is scant science behind Cambridge Analytica's controversial marketing techniques, and even scanter science that it works in elections. The truth is, political persuasion is actually significantly different from other forms of marketing and propaganda and doesn't work as well in those contexts. Again, I can give you the sites for these. So let me get to the part. There are definitely problems with political polarization in our society. I think there is a role that social media especially plays in sorting and reinforcing and creating an accelerant to what happens offline. But if we're focusing on those problems as opposed to focusing on the reasons that these messages are compelling to so many people, the reasons that they want to share them, the reason that they want to vote for the candidate who tells them these things, then I think we really do risk prosecuting the hand instead of trying to fix the maggots.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Ahmed, you're up.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm just still trying to figure out if the people are maggots, and if technology's the hand. So, listen.
Bad ideas are maggots.
Right. So, this moment that we're in is basically a paradoxical moment. The past 20 years, the first 20 years of the century, have brought a time of astounding advances in communications and information technology. Digitization, mass accessible video platforms, smartphones, social media, billions of people gaining access to the internet, and so much more. So all of these revolutionary changes imply a profound empowerment of individuals, right? We can all agree on that. That's the implication. And that the empowerment is one that provides exponential access or exponentially greater access to information, tremendous ease of communications, data sharing, and formal tools for networking across the globe. Yet despite all of these changes and all of these advancements, democracy, which is a political system that is based on the idea of empowering the individual, has in very many ways stayed the same or actually become stagnant across the world. So why is that? Why is the viability of existing democracies suddenly called into question when we've got such individual empowering technologies proliferating and growing exponentially. What might help us make sense of this inconsistency? So I think that what we need is a shift of focus. Rather than looking at the hands and the maggots, perhaps one thing we could do is think about, rather than the cool things that technology enables us to do, maybe we can think about the mental, social, and linguistic pathologies that technology might actually hoist upon individuals that it purports to empower. And by extension, how that in turn influences society. So it was John Adams that famously wrote that democracy cannot be preserved without a general knowledge amongst all people who have the right and the desire to know. In fact, the whole premise of democracy is that it's safe to leave these important questions to the court of public opinion. But the question is it safe to leave important questions to the court of public ignorance? I argue not. And in this moment, not only has technology diluted our ability to access credible sources of knowledge, it's actually pacified our very desire to think critically. And it's laid the groundwork for what commentators like James Brittle might call the new dark age, or an era where our understanding of the world and the world around us diminishes as the world becomes increasingly complex. So in this sense, you can think of technology as inducing people to give up their autonomy, challenging them to make a real effort to assert and defend what John Stuart Mill called the freedom of mind. And in fact, we can even think of modern technology as a store filled of subtle intellectual devices for solving the most complex problems and automating the most mundane of tasks, yet somehow it's made us almost incapable of applying the very most elementary principles of rational thought. So at the individual level, our personal choices are becoming personalized choices. I'll say that again. Our personal choices are becoming personalized choices. In the political context, one of the most important and sudden changes for several decades has been the move from a world of information scarcity to one of information overload. So available information is now far beyond the ability of even the most ordered brain. That's science. And since we can't categorize the information out there under any organizing principle, we live in an era of fragmentation and an overwhelming array of options. Instead of doing the work to make sense of it all, to deliberate, to have discussions, to use our discretion, fundamental components of decision-making that are integral to a democratic state, instead of doing that, we defer. We defer to absolute answers flowing from abstract and opaque algorithms whose functions are unknown even at times to its own creators. So if you are skeptical of what I'm saying, think of the devices that tell us when to eat, what to eat, when to go to work, how to get there. Everybody uses GPS, right? Sometimes our devices fail us and we end up driving off a cliff.
1 minute.
Passively and unflinchingly following the comfort of our blue navigation line telling us to go straight forward and not seeing what's in front of us. Those of you on college campuses, if it weren't snowing outside and you had some visibility, you might see a college student walking and holding their phone and swiping on Tinder. And that college student might cross over another college student that's also walking and swiping on Tinder. They're unaware of the fact that they might have actually just swiped on each other, but they're unaware of the fact that there are two eligibles that just crossed each other, right? That is the basic fundamental issue, is that we don't know what's around us because we see what's on the telephone and what our devices tell us.
Time's up. Thank you very much. Andrew.
So thank you. I'm delighted to be here. I want to disclaim the disclaimer. You should assume that the position I am taking is the position I hold. And I want to disclose my epistemic bias. I majored in Greek and Latin and did graduate work in philosophy and ancient history. You may discern traces of that. In July 2010, I was in Syria, Aleppo, Damascus, Palmyra, 7 months before that country blew apart. And I had a huge education during that trip because I observed that I could not access Twitter, YouTube, Skype, Wikipedia, Facebook. And I stopped to wonder why. I thought, what's the threat that Bashar al-Assad feels from these technologies? And it caused me to think more about information communication technologies and about our First Amendment, because I first thought of it in terms of freedom of speech and freedom of expression. And I decided, no, that's not it. It's about freedom of assembly. And the fact that these are connecting technologies that create virtual assembly. And if we look back to the Arab Spring, what was one of the highlights of the Arab Spring? Tahrir Square. People coming together and realizing that there were other like-minded people, and that perhaps banding together, they could make a difference. And I actually believe that freedom of expression is not the most important freedom in the First Amendment, because free expression does nothing when you're in solitary confinement. It is when you can connect with somebody else that your freedom of expression gains meaning. And all of these technologies we're talking about are technologies that fundamentally are connecting people. And the great irony of all of this is that a couple of years later, I gathered a group of friends on very short notice to go help Syrian refugees in northern Greece up on the Macedonian border. And what were the tools that I used? Facebook to create a group to go. Twitter to find out on-the-ground information, WhatsApp to communicate with other volunteers. It was so pleasing to me that the very tools that Assad suppressed in Syria were the tools that were essential for me to gather with others to carry out important work, helping his refugees. Look at the response of autocratic countries to the internet and to these technologies, and the countries and those autocratic regimes that perceive these to be threats. That's a clue for you as to whether technology fosters or undermines democracy. When Iran, Syria, India, North Korea, Turkey either engage in internet blackouts or suppress certain technologies that bring people together. Now, we can blame technology. You should know that in ancient Athens, you could bring a murder prosecution against an inanimate object. If a roof tile fell off a roof and killed somebody, you could actually prosecute the roof tile for the murder, and if it was guilty, you could throw it out of the city limits. How many people want to bring that kind of legal process against technology and the social media and throw it out? Okay? How many people want to do away with the internet, with Facebook, with the telephone and the like? And that's fine. Okay? But
Can we do that? Is that a possibility?
That's right. Or we could apply ostracism for the very powerful, kick them out for 10 years, and we could say, well, some of these companies are so powerful, we want to kick them out for 10 years. I'm not sure that the people here would vote for that, would vote for either of those outcomes. So the question then becomes, well, we're not going to kick them out, but maybe we should force them to do things, and we should force them to obey certain rules. And then the question is, who becomes the regulators? And then the Latin poet Juvenal asked the key question, who guards the guards? Who guards the custodians? Who regulates the regulators? Now, what I find interesting in this process is that the tech controversies are absolutely mirroring the political controversies. And it's notable that Congress has an extraordinarily low popularity rating, except that every member of Congress has a much higher rating than Congress as a whole. So people like theirs, they just don't want somebody else's. And sort of one of the problems of democracy goes back to the phrase from Jean-Paul Sartre's No Exit, which is hell is other people. In a democracy, the hell is other people. And so what to do about this? I'm with those who think that the solution is education. And let me tell you something. We have enough STEM. We have enough STEM. I don't want to hear about more STEM. STEM needs help. HLLP.
1 minute.
History, languages, literature, and philosophy. It requires academic rigor, self-examination, self-criticism, honesty, not in the sense of not telling lies, but honesty in terms of understanding how we've gotten where we are through an application of historical method and philosophical method to question our own assumptions. And so, and we've got to also to remember that you can weaponize technology, but this country has seen the weaponization of television. It has seen the weaponization of religion. It has seen the weaponization of law, and everything can be weaponized. And it is only when we study ourselves and rigorously examine ourselves as a society that we can make a difference. And to blame technology as the scapegoat is to evade the responsibility that we have for rigorous self-criticism and analysis. Thank you.
Perfect. Round of applause for all four. What was amazing about that was that all four speakers kept to time.
Wow.
I'm very impressed, very grateful. So we're moving to the next phase. Since I'm not a lawyer, I can't call it cross-examination because I'll take the wrong meanings, but each side gets to quiz the other. So we get to test the argument. So we'll ping-pong from one side to the other. So Ahmed and Paul, you can start asking a question of Andrew and Cindy.
Kind of a free-for-all, right?
No, we'll take turns.
And if
It's like the
if I
impeachment,
raise the intonation at the end of my long speech, that qualifies as a question, right?
I'll do my presiding judge act, and it's like, no, thank you, counsel,
So
that's
this
enough.
question is directed at Andrew. I think the Athenian tile you referenced has a lot in common with the 2010 internet you also referenced. Both are kind of relics of a different time, a simpler time, a time when the costs and benefits and risks were very different than they are today. And so as you think about Tahrir Square, this is my question. Have you thought about the powers that countries like Syria and other kind of totalitarian and autocratic countries now wield with these technologies? Think about China or Russia and what they'll do the next time there's a mass protest in their streets. Did you see the New York Times article which took cell phone location information from the Women's March and from the Trump protest and identified who the Department of Defense people in the audience were, who the White House aides were, because 14 different companies have that granularity of information and they sell them to the highest bidder. So what happens in 2020, the next time we have one of those in a country like Syria? Forget about what happened in 2010.
So I think that there is always an arms race. And we can't say that because some actors are deploying technology in anti-democratic methods means that technologies are anti-democratic. I represent virtual private network companies. And you know who really dislikes them? Hollywood. Because it doesn't want to interfere with the deals that Netflix may have with geolocation and different licensing regimes. We have to recognize that there are many fixes that people can bring to bear, and the question is, how are we going to regulate the conduct that underlies technological abuse? How do we deal with international jurisdictional rivalries and varied worldviews that make global governance difficult? These are difficult questions, but to me, these are not questions that cause us to blame technology, because again, we're going to dodge the question. Let's blame the people who have failed to exercise restraint and who have used them for leverage to make these strong even stronger.
So, question from this side.
You have a question?
You go ahead, I was thinking too much on that.
So Ahmed, I guess what I'm taking from your position is that we just have no free will. We're just kind of all zombies as a result of technology, and so I guess I'm trying to figure out, like, if that's true, how do we just have a bunch of elites who make all these decisions for us, who block themselves from technology and so can see when the rest of us are blind? Or Do we unplug the whole thing? Like, where does your observation take us with regards to self-governance? Because it seems to me that where it takes us is we just can't have it anymore.
So I just want to begin my answer by swinging back to the proposition, which is that democracy is undermining.
That works too, but yeah.
Yes. Technology. Okay, I've got 3 kids under 4. I was up at 2 a.m. East Coast. So, technology is undermining democracy. This doesn't mean that we're at the end of democracy thanks to technology, nor does it mean that technology, what it appears to be the case is that technology is a living, breathing thing, because it's not. It's just like a sword. It's just like a weapon. It's just like any type of technology, any tool, anything that has more than one purpose. And as you say, yes, they can, I'm not answering your question, but yes, technology can be used to extend our intentions, to extend our sensory motor capabilities, our cognitive capabilities, and yes, that can be used for good or bad, right? But using it for bad across borders, using it for bad with impunity, and so on, can result in, and has resulted in, derogation of the fundamental mechanisms of our democracy.
Is it bad form? Oh, go ahead.
No,
I'm going to cut you off.
To cut me off?
No. Well, I was gonna answer as well. But
Let's ask Alexa. But, yeah, so the question is, are we turning into zombies? We're not turning into zombies, but we are slowly, at least in my view, losing some free will. We are. The idea that there are documented cases of people using their GPS and driving off a cliff or driving into a pit, getting injured for not looking in front of them should be proof positive right there. The idea that we are talking about how we're going to regulate all of these technologies should be proof positive that these technologies are in fact undermining democracy. It doesn't mean that there's no solution, and it doesn't mean that we're in the theater shouting fire or in the Silicon Flatirons doing the same, right? But what it does mean is that there are these negative impacts of technology on the citizenry. And yes.
Just briefly, I would say we're not zombies, but we are puppets. And I would point to the legions of research that show the way that the technological masters who run our world now can use subtle, psychographic, A/B tested tools to get you to do exactly what they want, whether or not you know it. One recent study said shading the no button a tiny bit less black will get 60% more people to click yes, even though they don't want yes. And so I would give up, I'm sorry, on the illusion that we do have a lot of free will and control over what we do online. It's been taken away from us by our puppet masters.
Good. So now I'll take away the end of that answer.
Yeah.
You guys get to ask them a question.
Do you want a question?
I was not thinking.
Okay, let me ask a question. So Cindy, if I extend the line of the argument or one of the arguments I heard you making, and maybe you want to extend the line, it would mean we literally have nothing to worry about in the next election from Russian and Chinese interference. That, especially now that, in addition to knowing that the president is probably inviting it, that we should, drop our defenses and focus on other problems, because for some reason what I heard in your question is that we are so resilient and immune to the type of fake news and disinformation that all of us witness on a daily basis on social media, that we have bigger fish to fry, more important problems. Is that what you're calling for?
Well, no, I would say a couple of things. First of all, I think if you're focusing only on social media, then you're missing what's going on with the propaganda campaigns. I just think that again, back to the social science research, there's always been crazy pockets of people who think dumb things. So there's always been people who grasp on reality is not all that great. What tends to be the bigger driver, and again, I don't have that research right at my fingertips, although I think I did, but anyway, is when those ideas are reinforced by more trusted, more mainstream voices. So a bunch of people talking in a 4chan forum to each other about bad things is not what makes changes that affect democracy. It's when those messages are echoed by Tucker Carlson, when those messages are echoed by the President of the United States. And if we're focusing on technology as if technology is the problem and our solution is to try to change how the technology works through things like censorship and other and more tracking, which you mentioned surveillance as a problem with technology. I think surveillance is a problem with people. Don't blame the poor ones and zeros. They didn't want to track you. They just got written to do it. If you focus on the part that is the social media part of this, then you miss what's going on in the propaganda, and you miss what the actual force multiplier is that begins to impact democracy. And that has to do with other technologies and other parts of society. So I just worry that because we are tech people, and tech is new, that this whole problem is being framed around tech when it's actually not fundamentally about tech. Tech may have a tiny piece of it. But if we focus on tech as if it's the problem, first of all, then we think when we've solved tech, we've solved the problem, and we're going to be surprised at the next election, because that's not going to happen. But more importantly, this is a problem that is much bigger than technology, and if we only focus on the tech piece of it, we're going to miss what's really going on, and we're not going to solve it.
Do you want to have
I'd like
a
to
question?
just,
Or?
let me just add one
Okay.
thing, if I may.
Sure. Briefly.
Cindy said that Trump and Tucker Carlson were echoing. I'm not sure I agree with that. I think they're instigating. And I think a lot of what you're seeing on social media is actually the amplification of what is coming from the major sources of power and the broadcasters, particularly Fox News in the United States.
Yeah, I would take his friendly amendment. I actually think it works both ways.
Okay, good. Yeah, I think there's a subtext here, which is let's beat up on the conservatives. It'll be interesting to get another angle on that. Can we have a question from this side for that side?
Should Twitter stop giving politicians accounts, or should it stop Donald Trump from tweeting?
It's an interesting question, because until now, I would have assumed that you would have asked us, should we take this thing that evolved through natural history and became Twitter, right? Because it's a thing and not people, and completely disregard the way it's been developed and the way it's been designed and the way, frankly, it has been made to be weaponized. Because that's kind of how you've been talking about technology the entire hour, and I've been kind of stunned. I mean, I'll disclaim the disclaimer as well. I really believe in the side I'm arguing for, and it comes from a deep belief that technology, we too often will forget, is a product of individual human being design. And with these companies, quite often a cult of personality, which goes back to the value systems of one white man, right? And so, yes, we should change the way Twitter operates. Absolutely. I actually like both of your proposals. I wouldn't mind keeping politicians off Twitter and forcing them to go meet people in other ways. I wouldn't mind if Twitter would have a spine and force Donald Trump to kind of mediate what he's saying in the way he says it and the times he says it. Absolutely. I don't know if that withstands scrutiny of the First Amendment. I'm not sure we have the political will to do something like that. I just want to have that conversation because technology is undermining democracy.
And what about the role of, it's a third rail in American politics, but how do you feel about fake news from the pulpit?
Fake news from the pulpit?
From the pulpit in our religious institutions.
Yeah, if it's being amplified through technology, that worries me, right? So this isn't just an argument about democracy. And again, we can figure out what we mean by fake news from the pulpit, and I'm guessing everyone in the audience is thinking of something that's further down on the extremity, but let's just picture one that, I don't know, will lead people to commit ritual suicide. If that's being spread on social media, then yes, technology is undermining other things we should care about, not just democracy. Truth being one of them.
Ahmed, you have a
Yeah,
comment?
just to kind of relate that to the point Andrew was making earlier about Bashar al-Assad turning off the internet in Syria before the revolution in Syria.
The internet was okay, but those applications were not.
Syria at the time, all the media stations in Syria were nationalized. All of the radio stations in Syria were nationalized. There was full control over all technologies of communication with the exception of the internet, right? And so it's only natural that they would try to turn off certain sites. Egypt, for example, you mentioned Tahrir Square, gathering and speaking about creating what could be construed as a pirate radio station. If 3 or more people do that, you get 15 years to life, right? So I'm not really sure how social media is, how you're distinguishing social media from these other technologies.
Okay, so that's a good point. So would you like to ask that as a question, or do you guys want to go somewhere else?
Yeah, I mean, are we talking about social media? Are we talking about all technologies? If we're talking about all technologies that undermine democracy, how would you argue that in Rwanda during the genocide that technologies were not undermining the fundamental principles of democracy?
So I'm focused because we're not talking about CRISPR and we're not talking about biotech. We're talking largely about information and communication technologies. And so I stand for the proposition that more enablement of communication among persons in society, particularly among those who are not controlling the levers of power, and more information availability allows the type of debate that fosters democracy. It also triggers efforts to thwart information and communications. You were talking about the example of Google Maps, somebody drives into a lake or drives off a cliff, right? But there have been parents who would have advised children to do the equivalent in their lives, but children had access to the internet, can go and read something on Wikipedia and realize that what their parents are saying to them is not right. Children who can think for themselves against what their parents want to restrict them to know. The internet within a family dynamic has empowered children to say, I don't have to know only what my parents choose for me to know. I can know more. That's democracy in a microcosm. It's empowerment of people to think independently and to coordinate and connect with other people. And I think that is vastly anti-authoritarian. Can it be subverted as all powerful tools can be subverted by the powerful? Yes. But does it provide the opportunity to stand up against the powerful? Absolutely.
Do you want to throw a question that way?
Sure, I was getting ready to answer.
Oh,
but,
no, please.
No,
Do you wanna-
he keeps doing these mic drop moments. I don't need to say anything. My partner kicks ass. I have a question for Paul about this idea that the problem we have with technology is it gives too much power to people.
Sure.
And of course, he picks out just certain people, the hackers, who, by the way, are my people, but also harassers and other evildoers. And I'm wondering why, I mean, you know, democracy is supposed to be based on this idea of self-governance, right? And I just think it's, I'm having a hard time squaring your, what I hope is a support of democracy with the hatred of the people who are supposed to be self-governing.
Oh, I love a lot of people. I do hate a few people. And I worry that the people I hate are the ones who have been empowered. I mean, it connects directly to Andrew's last statement, which wasn't the first time he said it, which was this kind of all against all massive communication brawl should somehow be the paragon moment democracy has been working to since the Athenian beginning, or before. That somehow democracy is designed and meant to be the billions of people on Earth all talking to one another all the time. And I want to kind of put a vote out there for this fusty old notion of the value of intermediaries, that I still think, and I'm an academic, so I am in some ways an intermediary, and lawyers are intermediaries, and civil society groups are wonderful intermediaries, and we used to have these things for the younger students in the room called newspapers, which again weren't the sole arbiters of the truth, but they had to contend and put their reputation on the line and not hide behind a pseudonym and fight it out in this. It probably never was a marketplace of ideas, but it was far better than the kind of Hobbesian war of all against war that we have right now, all against all, that you seem to be glamorizing. And I think both the questions, right? I think we can have a world where there are good people online and bad people online, and we should be able to use things like the rule of law to encourage the former, punish the latter, and intermediaries have a role to play in that.
Can I answer too?
Yeah.
Yeah, on that note, or perhaps a tangent to that note, I think what you guys are talking about is maybe technology being sort of beneficial to movement building, to revolution, to certain types of actions against a state, it sounds like. But I'm not sure that's the same as democracy. And I'm not sure I've heard really the justification for why technology, writ large, let's even couch it to information technology, why that is in any way, shape, or form helpful to democracy. Let's start with that, and then comma, you mentioned that it was a technology that enabled the individuals in places like Syria and Egypt and such to stand up against the authoritarian regime. Yet all of those people are either, almost all of them, are either dead or in jail. And the ones that are in prison, the ones like in Egypt, for example, that are in prison, were located and prosecuted using surveillance that would not have been possible but for internet technologies. So how is that in any way reconcilable with your position?
Well, two things. First, I think that if you, let me answer your second question first, which is, I don't think all technology serves democracy. I also, more importantly, don't think all implementations of technology serve democracy. And you know, the fact that we've decided that the best business model for online technologies is a surveillance business model did not come down from, did not come up from Silicon nor down from Moses. This was a choice that humans made about how the internet was going to work, and it was not the only available one. So again, I go back to the humans, right? I mean, I completely want to build a world in which our technology doesn't surveil us, and I think we can, and it's not the technology that is to blame for that. It is the humans. It is the business model, and the business model combined with the interests of the national security state in I would say most of the countries, but certainly our own, that has created the surveillance society we live in now. And I happen to know a little organization based in San Francisco that spent about 30 years trying to fight that and continues to do so, using, by the way, lots of technology. So my point remains, we've met the enemy, he is us. It is the humans, not the poor ones and zeros, who should be to blame for the problems with democracy today. In terms of movement building and democracy, I guess I see them connected because I don't know how you make political change without the rights of assembly, without people talking to each other, without the things that Andrew so eloquently pointed to. When society wants to, in my lifetime, somebody had to turn to somebody else and say, you know what, I think gay people ought to be able to marry each other. That conversation could not be a public conversation when it started. That could not be a conversation that was available to everyone. And that wasn't something you could have Walter Cronkite say, or mainstream news, or mainstream media. It was a far, far outside the mainstream thing to say in my lifetime. And we've seen it go from that all the way to something that is the law of the land, thanks to Supreme Court case, but lots and lots of hard work along the way. And so I think people being able to talk to each other and have the right to assembly is fundamental, because self-governance doesn't mean anything unless people have the ability to have access to and gather together around new ideas, not just the ones that were given by the elites and the intermediaries and the academics that maybe came before.
You know, it's funny. There's Kermit the Frog had this wonderful saying, which is that time's fun when you're having flies. But like, we're going to have to wrap up this phase and move on. So we're going to move to closing statements. So each speaker will get 3 minutes. Before we do that, let me just bring up for you. I'm not suggesting that you vote immediately. Listen. Then we get close to the end. Please vote. You'll see that the URL has changed. The word first is now the word second. And so please vote there. And then when all the speakers have had their last shot at persuading you, we'll see what happened. Go ahead.
I thank everyone up here. This has
minutes.
been a lot of fun. I thank Cindy in particular, because she, in her last answer, did two things that I find important. One, I think we're actually kind of close together. It allows me to have a little bit of optimism. But I would contend that if we follow the argument she was putting out at the end, it means we should win. Because the argument that I heard was that should and can we as a society band together and make our tools better? And I absolutely believe we can. But that begs the question, are the tools working today? And I think they are working for some people. They seem to be working really well for Duterte, and they seem to be working for Putin, and they seem to be working for a man named Donald Trump. And in many ways, that's not because technology is this kind of neutral thing and Donald Trump is a master of technology. It's because the technology is designed in a way that tends itself to favor extremism and despotism and autocracy and oligarchy. It was created, as I said before, by individuals in Silicon Valley who are fixated on the bottom line, on the business model, on becoming a unicorn, on looking for the next round of funding. It's very rare that you hear that they're building their companies based on values, based on the kind of philosophy that Andrew would like to make required reading for all of them. So again, let me end on that note of optimism. We can build better technology that serves and doesn't destroy or undermine democracy. It's just not the technology we have today.
I do also agree that we're not very far apart, but that the conclusion of that should be that we are correct. And that's because I don't think the problem is technology. If you're focusing on technology, you're focusing on the supply side of the information, and you're not looking at the demand side of the information. And it's true that our frame of reference here, I take Pierre's point, that our frame of reference here seems to be that the wrong person got elected to the presidency because a lot of dumb people voted for him. And I don't think that's right. And I actually think that unless we look at why people, and a lot, I guess, let me take it all the way. A lot of dumb people voted for the wrong person because they were convinced to it by technology. And so therefore, that's the problem in democracy. And I think that that does a huge disservice to the people who made the choice that they made, even if I disagree with it, to think of them as puppets or zombies or anything else. These are people who I think are making a rational decision based upon what their world looks like. And if we're blaming the technology for that, we're not looking at what they're actually saying. So I think we can build technology that supports people. I definitely think that there is a problem with the surveillance business model, but the problem isn't with the technology, it's with the business model. The problem that we have is that we have technological businesses that are based on the idea that they try to keep you on the platform as long as possible. And, spoiler alert, keeping people pissed off and polarized will keep them on the platform longer, which raises the revenue of the companies. We need to figure out how to get at that underlying problem. I'm certainly, EFF supports privacy legislation. We've supported it since long before it was cool. we need to get at the problem of the surveillance business model. But I think if we're going to fix democracy, as in have people make better informed choices, we have to look at why they're making the choices they're making now, and not just blame Mark Zuckerberg, as much as fun as that is.
All right.
But I really want to blame.
No, it feels so good. It's simple.
Anyone that knows me knows that there is very slight divergence between what Cindy says and what I believe. And in fact, anything that she argues, I tend to be swayed towards that direction, with the exception of this point. Why?
Go on then.
Because it misses the very point of the proposition, which is not that technology is a person, technology is the zombie, technology is a rock. It's none of these things. Technology is technology. It assists, it supplements human capability, right? If humans do bad stuff and technology magnifies that bad stuff, then we're got. Then you've got to basically vote for us. Why? Think of three people in a room trying to form a democracy, right? Trying to initiate a democratic process. Now put a gun in one of those people's hands. That's a technology. All of a sudden, we don't live in a democracy anymore, right? So just think of it that way. Just a couple of points. We said there was a point on the Benkler study and the impact of fake news. And the study found that actually fake news and the Russian election interference campaign did not sway votes. And that's not the point. The point is that the fact that the Russians interfered in our democratic campaign, in our democratic elections, has caused us to lose faith in the ability of those elections to deliver results. It's not the point as to whether or not, I actually agree. I agree. And my first sort of objection was there's no empirical proof that the interference did anything. But there is proof that many of us now are either disenchanted by the voting process or have lost faith in it. I've also heard from both of our opponents that it would be nice to build a world in which technology does not surveil us, in which technology is used by those that have the qualities of leaders of the free world. And I think that's terrific. Call me when they build it, and I'll change my mind on the proposition. And then finally, the rights of assembly. Again, we were talking about people. It's people that create change, not technology. The people all across the Arab world were gathering in spaces in real life to actually have conversations before using Twitter and Facebook to initiate a tactical protest. And if one of the things that my friends in Tahrir Square, when I actually went down there to join the revolution, were fuming about is the idea that Mark Zuckerberg could take credit for their revolution. Come on, guys. Like, how Western is that? Really? Okay.
Time's up. Counsel, last word.
So I think the fundamental paradox here is that we're talking about information and communication technologies that are extraordinarily popular. Why did the Facebook rival Path fail and go out of business? Because you could only connect with your 25 or 50 best friends. In fact, people wanted something much more powerful. People complain about Facebook, but they want it. They complain about Twitter, but they want it. They complain about lots of technologies, but they want them for themselves, maybe not for others. So the question is, do people need to be saved from themselves? That's sort of the fundamental question here. And what rules will we have to regulate technologies so that people don't get exactly what they want? And the notion that we're going to find somebody who's going to save people from themselves and find somebody who's going to bring or find rules that will bring order out of this messy, chaotic democratic process. I'm not saying they're advocating it, but this is the same toolkit that authoritarians have used to bring themselves in power who've come in as very, very popular figures. What's the fix? How do you save people from themselves? Education. It's more anthropology majors, as Phil Weiser pointed out, developing empathy, perspective, understanding of history, getting people to connect in positive ways through education. And we should be looking at education as the lever here rather than restrictions and control of technology. Thank you very much.
Was this good or was this good? Okay. And so then there's a small matter that Paul is not at all interested
I
in.
put way too much personal pride
Paul
in this.
really
but
was
yeah.
sad. He was
This is
gonna
like,
lose.
yeah.
All right,
Yeah.
so this, no, wait,
No, that's
wait.
the first
This is
one.
before.
This is the first one, and I'm just going to hit
Before
refresh
45.
just so that we
I
get
thought it was the
the
second.
up-to-date count.
Oh, this is the first poll.
This is still the
this
first, yeah.
This is still the first one. And, okay, so
more people voted.
nothing changed. It was 56 to 44. And the votes were
100.
100 votes.
100%.
56 votes.
56 to, wow, even I can do that math. All right. Guys, that's what a STEM education
But
gets
that's
you.
just still, those are just
still
the
the first one.
percentages again.
All right.
No, 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 that's only
I
two
think
people.
that's-
That's only
100
two
votes,
people.
it's
That
still
was
the same
fake
thing.
news. I don't think it was just 100
was
votes.
fake
That
news,
seems
exactly.
really convenient.
Fake
All
news.
right. So now we hold our breath while the pigeons
Hey.
come in.
No, no,
Hey, no way.
no way,
No way.
no way.
Nicely done. Well done.
Rigged! Rigged! Rigged election!
Wait.
Rigged election!
You don't have faith in democracy? I'm
Wait,
confused.
I
right.
want a risk limiting audits. Did you guys have, we have paper backups. We need a risk
Wait, you guys
limiting
have-
audit.
You have no faith in the technology? You think the vote's not valid?
We didn't talk about election technology. That's a whole other kettle of fish.
I know.
All right, and we have break time.
Great.